I think first and foremost, I don't know how many of you know Aggreko or know what we do, but we're very proud and honoured to be the official energy temporary supplier to London Olympic and Paralympic Games for 2012. Been an amazing journey. We're a global business specialising in energy services. We run two business models, one in a mature market such as the UK, which is our local businesses, and that's very much our events base. And we're also supplying utilities and power in emerging markets and in countries that are lacking utility and services of that nature. We operate in over 100 countries around the world, somewhere in the 50s of the FTSE 100 at the moment, market capitalization of around 5.5 billion. And we've been the fastest growing company in the FTSE 100 for the last 5 years. So, but that doesn't make an Olympics any more easier. If anything, it probably makes the expectation a little bit higher. We've got a little bit of a track record of being involved with organising committees and delivering the games, but none quite as London. Lucky enough, we've been involved way back to Barcelona and Albertville in 1992. What this has allowed us to do is allowed us to actually build a great amount of knowledge and skill within our business. And for that, you've got to invest in that, and you've got to make that commitment. And I think one of my messages is, if you want to be on the Olympic journey, once you're on, you've really got to go for it. There's no half measures. And that's something that we've embraced as a business. You're obviously in sport, as many things in life, remembered for your last performance. And I'm sure Hugh Robertson is sat, can't wait for the end of the Paralympic closing ceremony, because he'll be looking forward to that legacy that it's going to give Great Britain. You still have to earn the right at every Games. So we're working hard now with the organising committee at Sochi and at Rio to carry on our Olympic legacy. It's something we very much want to do. But hopefully our track record has allowed us to take on things, bigger and greater at every Games. And what we've done in London is provide the biggest scope of temporary power that we've provided at any Games. For those of you that might be wondering what prime power is, it basically means running generators. Horse Guards Parade was run completely as a prime site. We worked closely with LOCOG to identify utility supplies. Due to the nature of the venue and the cost of putting in those utility supplies, they went with a temporary solution. Our challenge was then to make sure that that temporary solution not only worked, but had the minimum impact on the environment and the venue as a whole. It truly was a grid-to-socket Games for us. Those of you that were there potentially plugging in your laptops and your mobile phones in the press areas or in the hospitality areas, we provided over 50,000 13-amp sockets at the Games. That's something we've not done before. But worked hard with LOCOG in that design phase, as Joe says, to make sure that we got the best solution possible. You've seen lots of numbers today. I've got a numbers slide as well, so I won't try and bore you with the numbers, but the numbers for London have been huge, and the investment has been huge. We invested over, well, I can tell you now, it's been over £30 million worth of capital in delivering London. A lot of it came from our new manufacturing facility in Dumbarton, so we were able to invest back in the UK economy in that way, and something we're very proud of. So I'm not going to run down these numbers, but it is a huge investment of not just people and time, but of resources to make it happen. I remember when I was back in Vancouver, working with our American colleagues just to find out what it was all about. And only an American, forgive the Americans in the room, could say this to me. He said, "You can't be 3/4 pregnant." And I said, "No, surely not." And I think what he was trying to say to me was, if you're going to go for it, you got to go for it and work with the organising committee, and that's what we did. So what were the keys to achieving the results? Undoubtedly, putting people, as Jeff and David and Joe have said, putting people in your organisation who know and have got some experience is key. You can learn along the way, but to gather that experience either through working with other contractors or doing previous events is key. You must focus on design in what we do. We've done a huge amount of work with Kelvin Freeman and the guys at LOCOG, and early delivery planning. You can't be late. You've got to be ready, and you've got to rise to the challenge. and that's what's required. Sustainability and environment's been a key theme all through this morning, and for a company that burns the odd amount of diesel, sometimes that can be a challenge, but I think it is achievable, and you've got to look at ways at actually reducing the amount of energy that's used, or actually distributing that energy in imaginative ways, and we've had to do some of that. We embraced the requirement of LowCog to sign up to their sustainability agenda, and obviously as a sponsor, that's part of our sponsorship responsibilities. We transported over 130 containers into London via rail. I'm led to believe we're the biggest user of rail amongst the sponsor group, and we invested a number of millions of pounds in actually exceeding the emission criteria, not just in this country but in the US, and developing particulate filter technology for use on the generators. These were used extensively in Horse Guards Parade, and hopefully those of you who were there didn't notice the generators too much. We like to stay in the background and be unnoticed in those environments. We've got a few minutes left. As the guys have said, compressed nature of the venue, dedicated team. That's one of our learnings is get your team engaged early with the venue. Venue knowledge is absolutely critical in a job of this size. If this was an event on its own, Horse Guards Parade would have been a major undertaking. To do it while we were working across another 40-odd venues was a challenge, to say the least. There's some great shots. These are back-of-house shots, but you can see that the challenges are all around space, working within the Royal Parks environment, and ensuring that actually when the public turned up, we were as inconspicuous as possible. The only real challenge that I'm going to mention on here is you've got to be prepared for change, because even when you rock up, and I'm sure Joe will say this, even when we rocked up on the 18th of June, some things were different than what we thought they were going to be, and you've got to deal with them. And I think, to echo what Jeff said, involving the supply chain early allows them to deal with those changes and be familiar with the venue. And I think we've got a little time-lapse video just to finish with. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Robert. That was fantastic. Whilst this is running, I'll just wrap up here. And looking at the audience here, I think you would agree that just these four companies before you show an absolute wealth of delivery experience. There are untold other companies in the UK that work in the event business, work in the event delivery business, and it's something that the UK excel in. And if there's a message to anybody in the room that wants to be part of that, the first thing I'd say, it's not easy. It's quite difficult. And the second thing I say is it's not for free. You have to invest a lot. And it's a bit like Robert was saying, you can't be a little bit pregnant. If you're going to go for it, you've got to go for it. But you can't go for it in half measures. And what that does mean, and it's a lesson that I learned from John Tibbs actually many years ago. He said, you have to get in early and you have to be prepared to spend your own money for no guaranteed return. And that is so true. But if you get in and you're in and you can demonstrate that you can achieve international best practice, then the world is your oyster, because what happens is the circus goes from city to city about once every 2 years or about once every year if it's a FIFA World Cup and a Commonwealth Games, and you get in with these people, you establish relationships, you build your networks, and be prepared to spend some money, because it does cost a lot. And if you're not prepared for that, then don't do it. Stay and find your business elsewhere. So I'd like to thank these guys for giving up their time this morning to hopefully inform you. We haven't really got time for any questions. John, mate, if one? Oh, the first-hand gentleman in the blue shirt.
Hi, good morning. Duncan Firth from Deloitte. I had the good fortune to, on behalf of local appoint Arena for Horse Guards. It's been a pleasure working with them as a team. Joe, you referred to the contract you were appointed under, which was quite unique, which was the turnkey contract that you talked about. Just if you've got a few minutes, just explain perhaps what that is. And I'd actually like to get a view from the panel as to the future of that, really, and how that might be taken forward internationally.
Hi, Duncan. Sorry, I didn't recognise you. I haven't got my right glasses on this morning. Good morning to you. Duncan was the client. I think, Joe, if you could, sort of sum that up in about 30 seconds, and then I'll say something about that too.
Thank you, Duncan, and forgive me if I didn't actually reference you, because you've been a star throughout the whole piece. That's from me personally. I think it's having the whole picture, being in from the beginning, establishing a relationship, a rapport, a working relationship, understanding the extent of the scope of work, and then employing the right people around you to execute those works. I think we demonstrated collectively, yourself, Populous, ourselves, that we were up to the game. We evolved best practice. We have demonstrated that it's possible, and we've took some lessons from CDM, ACOP, the construction industry. It's been a learning curve, a huge one, but it's one I've enjoyed tremendously.
Okay, I'm going to take one more question from Peter Shad. I'm sorry. And while the microphone's getting to him, could somebody give Peter a microphone there? I would just like to say something about that, in that the contract was awarded on a pretty unique basis, and it's something that was talked about for other venues, and particularly the equestrian venue. And having worked on both projects, you can compare and contrast how each of those venues were delivered. They were of similar size, and for our part, the most successful way of delivering a temporary infrastructure of that complexity is to do it as a team. And you can only do it as a team if you all trust one another. And you can only gain that trust by working together from the early stages of the project, because, the client needs to trust the suppliers, but the supplier needs to trust the client too. You have to be a good client to pull something like this off. So we would say, every time, turnkey delivery and trust the supply chain, but get to know the supply chain early. It comes back to this early engagement all the time.
Question and answer for the final one, please, because we're right on
Thanks,
the limit
John.
of time now.
I'll speed up. Peter Shad, PKL. We've been fortunate to supply a number of Olympics over the years, and how we've got involved is actually being involved very early, helping some of the design development even before tenders are produced. I just wondered, on something as complicated as your venue, were you and other companies actually involved even before the official tender procedure with Populous to actually create that?
Yeah, very much so. As I sort of started off the presentation, we were called in at pre-tender stage, at concept stage, by local Populous team, just to see if this was possible, and we were then part of the team all the way through. There was a gap. There was a tender process that had to be adhered to. We were part of the tender process. It was a publicly tendered opportunity of which we took part in. Arena won that tender and then moved forward with the rest of the project. But it was also part of our job at the end to get people like you involved, because we called our supply chain to ask them of the possibilities of how we would deliver this mad thing.
Okay, Jeff, I'm not going to allow you to pass that on down the line because we're now eating into coffee time. But if you do want to carry on your conversation with Joe O'Neill, Dave Crump and Robert Wells, please do so. Jeff, thank you to all of you very much indeed. That was excellent. Thank you very much.